All right, thank you all very much. And welcome to Telluride Historical Museum for this Indigenous Peoples Day program. The museum is absolutely delighted to be able to take part in this. As purveyors of the town's history, we certainly understand the need going forward for understanding, dialogue, to promote a sense, just to promote true reconciliation with our Native communities. So we're delighted to have even just a small role in this whole process, and thrilled that Art asked us to be a part, and hopefully this can be one step in a very long journey, but a very positive step as well. So I hope you all enjoy the program we have set for you today. We learn something, and we can again move forward in that process towards reconciliation. So with that, I would like to bring up Art Good Times. He's a board member on the Telluride Institute's board and the director of the Youth Reconciliation Project, or program. So welcome, Art.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here at the Historical Museum. When I first came to Telluride in '79, I slept on a porch in Placerville, and so I got to know what the weather was like here. That was really interesting. And then the next year I came to Telluride, and I ended up becoming a Historical Museum board member. So the Historical Museum has always been important to me. And I wrote a history column for the first 15 years I lived here called Mining the Gold, in which I reviewed a whole lot of history that I thought was our local history, which was the mining history. But I didn't know anything, really, about Native American history, even in spite of all of those studies and all of those time. I didn't know we had a Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs, a state organization, since the '70s. As a commissioner, no one ever told me. There was no notice or anything. When we went for the San Juan Wilderness Bill, did we consult with the Native people? No. And so there's a whole lot of gaps between our relationships. And I think one of the things we've been trying to do with the Telluride Institute in San Miguel County was try to bridge some of those gaps to understand that this was Ute land. They were dispossessed, swindled really out of it. And we are the beneficiaries. We didn't do it. The people here aren't the people that were the victims, but they're descendants of victims, and we're descendants of the people that colonized and pioneered this place. And so I think if we really want to go forward with good hearts, it's important that we recognize what happened in the past, understand it, and see where we are today, see what we can do together to make this a better place. And so with that, we've decided, with the help of San Miguel County, with the help of Durfee Day, with the help of Dan Collins of the Institute, and with the Historical Society, and so many of you, we've been able to start a program to begin a cultural exchange. And our Indigenous Peoples Day last year was the beginning. We're doing it again. Again, a chance to educate and heal, to understand where we came from, what happened, and how we can move forward. We're really lucky to have three wonderful speakers today. Ernest House Jr. is the director of the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs. He was appointed by Governor Owens. He was reappointed by Governor Ritter, left for a little while and came back and has been working with Governor Hickenlooper. So he has a lot of governmental experience, even though he comes from right here. He's a Ute, Mountain Ute, and his family is an old family, and he can tell you more about that. We also have Regina Lopez Whiteskunk, and her family is again Ute, Mountain Ute, and she was one of the tribal council people that I met when I went to a CCIA meeting one time. And I was very impressed with the way she spoke. And then I heard her, you may have heard her, on the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition videos. And she spoke eloquently and passionately about why Bears Ears is so important, not only to Native people, but to us as well. And so we're really delighted to have her with us as well. And then we have Peter Pino and his wife Stella from the Zia Pueblo. Peter, for 41 years, was administrator of the Zia Pueblo, so he's very familiar with government and how things work. And it's made him an activist in many ways. He is on the Native American Rights Fund, which is one of the premier legal organizations for Native people in the country. And it's located right in Boulder. And again, a wonderful organization doing many, many different kinds of legal things to make this a better place for Native people. So again, I'm really delighted you're going to hear some really interesting things. I hope if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I think they're very interested in responding as well. With that, I'd like to begin with Ernest House Jr. Please give him a welcome.
Mike, thank you. It's an honor to be with you all. First and foremost, thank you, Art. And thank you to the History Museum, the Institute, the San Miguel County Commissioners, and just all of you for your encouragement in bringing this process along. I'm going to try to give you a context of American Indian history in Colorado in about 15 minutes, covering 150 years, so bear with me. But until I get to that point, and then of course Regina and Peter will talk about their own experience after myself, but before we do that, I'd like to bring up our tribal royalty. This is from the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, and I want to have them introduce themselves to you. These young people are the ambassadors for our tribe. And so there are 567 federally recognized tribes throughout the United States, and many of them have these type of youth ambassadors for their tribal nation, their pueblo, their tribal nation, wherever they may be located. And so if you folks want to go ahead and come on up, and I'd like for them to introduce themselves to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Taya Ketchum. I want to thank everyone for coming out today and inviting us here. It means a lot. And hope you guys have a good day and enjoy getting some information today. Thank you.
Mike Nunania Lily Collins Jr. I am the young warrior for the Imandi tribe. Mike Nunania Moen Leland Lee Collins Sr. Nunania Bien Sarah Dawn Collins Nunania Kachikchin Lupi Height Leon Collins Stevie Height Roger Redfoot, the late Melly Redfoot, and the late Billy F. Turtle. Good afternoon, everybody. It is kind of an honor to be here on Indigenous People Day. I'd like to thank everyone for coming as well, and I'd like to thank people who were thoughtful enough about us. And have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
So these young people are obviously amazing. You'll see that the way they introduce themselves is also recognize their family, their grandparents, where they're from, and that goes through different tribes. Different tribes have a process of doing that. And every year, our tribal community holds different events so young people can vie to have the position that they hold for a year. And so that's what I want to make sure to time myself, or else we will be here for the next 5 hours. But one of the big things that I have the honor of doing, so I'm a member of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, as Art said. We all as Native people we come from tribal leadership. That's what we've evolved from. My family, my great-grandfather was Chief Jack House, who was the last hereditary chief of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, passed away in 1971. My father was the late Ernest House Sr., who was the longest-serving tribal leader for our tribe. And in that capacity, I grew up learning and getting drugged to a lot of, like these young kids do, to a lot of these meetings of water rights and hunting rights and fishing rights. And all I really wanted to do was just go see the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. when it was done and have space ice cream. But I think after all that has settled, I found my place here as the Executive Director for the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs for the last 10 years. I've served for 3 governors, 4 lieutenant governors, and it's both Republican and Democrat. I'm probably the only one in the administration that has transitioned between different party administrations. And I think a lot of that is because once our state leadership here in Colorado specifically find out that Native American issues are not supposed to be political. We run in our community not on party lines. We run for office just based on our intention, what kind of ideas and things we want to bring back to the community. So really putting politics behind a lot of this, eventually, as we know, is where a lot of it's going to go. But for back in the tribal community, it comes back to culture, it comes back to heritage, it comes back to language, which really doesn't have a place in politics. And I think that you'll see that throughout the last 150 years in Colorado, we have very much made it that, and what we're trying to do at the state level is reverse and go back to recognizing and respecting our tribal leaderships on a government-to-government basis. So I just want to show you a couple slides to start us out on a basic knowledge point of our tribe, the Utes here in Colorado. If you want to go ahead and go to the next one. So this is a little bit about my commission. We were started for 40 years ago. It's in the Lieutenant Governor's office. Believe it or not, Lieutenant Governor, Colorado is the only state that the Lieutenant Governor chairs the Commission of Indian Affairs. Once he or she gets in that position, they usually don't know they have that role. That's where I step in and say, this is what we do, this is the process, this is how you don't stick your foot in your mouth, and we go through that process. But we work with our two Ute tribes. We, at the state, refer to our two tribes as the oldest continuous residents of the state of Colorado. But we also, a couple years ago, signed an agreement with 48 historic tribes of Colorado. So that's what we're actually doing. Because we have such a great working relationship, and I'm a little biased, and you can ask Regina, or you can ask any of our former tribal leadership, even still today, they will tell you that the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs, as a state agency, has been very effective in being a liaison between the state and the tribe. And if you don't know, there's a very complex, convoluted, federal tribal relationship. And a lot of people will ask me, well, why do you want the state to get involved? The state didn't sign those treaties. Well, we did in some cases. The state doesn't have any fiduciary responsibility like the federal government. Well, actually, I would beg to differ. I think that we do. And so it's because of that relationship that we've been able to start this. The next one. And so if you're wondering, what do you mean 48 tribes of Colorado? Here's that list. Pueblo of Zia is on here, along with the other 18 Pueblo tribes in New Mexico. All the way down to Isledo del Sur. You might not be able to see that because there's a lot of tribes on here. That's actually in Texas, believe it or not. So we have tribes that had reservations in Colorado that were established, that historically were here, and then over time were forcibly removed, either by treaty or by the state public campaign, like the Northern Utes, all the way through the process. And these are actually tribes that we meet with, my office meets with, when we're talking about Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act issues. Believe it or not, we have the strongest policy at a state level in all of the United States when it comes to respectfully approaching and addressing Native American human remains. And I'll get a little bit more to that in a little bit. So you're wondering, all right, we're talking about the Utes. What historically? Well, there was numerous bands of Utes. Let's start with just the number 7, because the 7 bands make up the 3 Ute tribes today. And you'll see those names right here. A lot of those names may look familiar to you because they're names like national forests, rivers, mountains, right? And what those tribes make up today, those bands, consolidated to make up the 3 Ute tribes today. So the largest band out of all of the 7, Wee-Manuch band, that's the Ute tribe. The 2 Mawatch-Kapoti band make up the Southern Ute Indian tribe. And then the other 4 that were removed from Colorado make up the Northern Ute tribe in Fort Duchesne. You can go ahead and click it again. So the green line actually represents the traditional hunting routes of the Utes. Now again, this is just one tribe of what we now federally recognize as 567. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to even ask Peter what his traditional area for Zia would be. And if you're wondering where those bands would normally, Utes are we were nomadic people, right? And thanks to the Utes, and then of course CDOT coming in years later, we now have passes over the mountains. We have I-70, but on the eastern plains in Denver, when I go and do talks to different folks, I usually tell them that there was an I-25 corridor long before concrete was ever put there, because of the different tribes that were moving east to west, north to south. If it was the plains tribes, or if it was western tribes like out here in the western slope. Good. So here we have the map of Colorado as we know it today. Go ahead, hit the next one. This is the first Ute reservation in 1868. And I like these next slides because it'll show you, again, what one tribe went through as an example of progression of land lost. The next one. Right after the Meeker incident, we like to call it, and I'm sure many of you know about it, but I won't go into the details of it. This huge portion, you saw it was all one big block. That big portion was taken away. It was the Bruno Agreement, and Even though that block was taken away, the federal government said, actually, we'll let the Utes hunt and fish on here so long as the grass is green and you're at peace with white men. That's usually how the ending of all treaties went, right? But if you know this area, and you do because we're in this area, and you're from this area, is that because of the gold and the silver and the mining, the influx for folks coming to southwestern Colorado was too much for the federal government to keep non-tribal, non-Ute people out. That's why it was found, taken away, carved out, and then you want to go ahead and hit the next one. Then that's what it went down to. If you see that little tiny, and it's a little bit harder in the back, that's called the Ute Strip. And then you want to go ahead and hit the next one. And then by today, this is what the tribal reservation lands look like. Ute Mountain Ute Tribe is in the blue. The Southern Ute Indian Tribe is in the red. The Northern Ute Tribe now is pushed out of Colorado, and their land is in Fort Duchesne. And I'll get into some of the specifics here in a little bit, but there's a great quote at the redesigned, reopened Ute Museum from one of our Southern Ute elders that says, "We, as in Utes, lost Colorado in 40 years. From the early 1800s to the 1880s, up until the very beginning of the early 1900s, this is what it looks like today." Both tribes signed tribal constitution in 1924 and 1934 respectively. So that's what we work off as a tribe currently today. Next one. So if you're wondering what the Ute Mountain tribe looks like in terms of numbers, here's a little demographics for you. Ute Mountain tribe, 600,000 acres. We're in 3 states, 2,400 members. We have a communal landowner reservation. We can get more specifics of that. 7-member governing council. Not all tribes operate like this. This is just Ute Mountain. And this last one is a tricky one because it's a hot topic today for all tribes of who gets to say they're Native American. I work in Denver, and I talk to a lot of schools and Native students up in Denver. And a lot of them, it's very complex because they could be multiple tribes, but they may not have enough blood quantum or requirement to be recognized by any one of those tribes, believe it or not. And it's a little complex, but I can get more into specifics later. But then you have Southern Ute Indian tribes, same thing. So that's what the Ute tribal land and status looks like in Colorado. Now, if you're wondering what non-Ute looks like, so Colorado's last census, we have the American Indian population makes up less than 2% of the state's population. Actually, it's 1.86%. That's very similar to the national numbers. Nationally, Native Americans represent 2% of the total United States population. So getting more specifics of what 1.86% means, that comes out roughly a little over 60,000 American Indians in Colorado. Of those 60,000, over 40,000 live in the Denver metro area alone, including Boulder County. And so that 7-county district in Denver area is what the largest population, over 40,000. Now of that number, of that 40,000, that represents over 200 different tribes. Currently today, over 78% of the total U.S. American Indian population lives off of the reservation. I'll say that again. Over 78% of the total U.S. Native American population lives off of the reservation. Now why is that interesting and why do I continue to bring that up? Is because communities like Denver, Phoenix, Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, Los Angeles are going to get more and more Native American people moving there. Why? They're looking for jobs. They're looking for housing. They're going to college. They're staying there. Now it's a difficult situation if you're a tribal leader in Toyoak, Colorado, just trying to keep 2,400 people there in your community. How are we, at the same time, advocating for our young people to go on and get higher education? They have an opportunity to go to universities outside of the state or in the state. That's fine, but it's becoming harder and harder to keep them or bring them back because there are no jobs, because there's no housing. And it's a difficult position to put them in. And so that's a bit of the dichotomy there that I think currently we're seeing with that population going off the reservation to get more opportunities. How do we get them back in? And then a couple of things, and I'll have Regina talk more about the Braidance if she wants to. We can go to the next slide. One of the interesting things we don't talk enough about in Ute history, which I will circle back around to, is the Battle of Mill Creek. Now, this is also the Meeker incident, right? And if you've never been to this site, I would encourage you to do that. The picture's a little bit hard to tell, but the Meeker incident was so important to history, to Colorado's history, that we don't talk about it enough. We're currently working on a Ute curriculum now with the Colorado Department of Education so that it will be available to every 4th grader that's learning Colorado history at the same time. And that'll be something that we can follow up with this community. But I always put something like this because I wanted to put what Nathan Meeker was talking about at the time when he took the Indian agency and wanted to be the agent in Meeker, Colorado, what his thoughts were. And it was not any different than Evans, than Gilpin, than these state leaders that we've had in the past, their thought process of the Utes must go. I mean, clearly, we had a territorial governor write an opinion piece in the Rocky Mountain News in the 1800s asking citizens of the state of Colorado to take up arms and to kill all Indians in the state. There was an Indian problem in Colorado. This was in the 1800s. And you think about it, 150 years ago, that's a long time. That's not a long time ago, right? And I think that the opportunities that we see here with San Miguel County recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day, the opportunity you see with Denver, the city of Denver passing Indigenous Peoples Day declarations last year, Durango, we're going to Salida tomorrow to do a renaming of a mountain peak there after Chipeta. On Monday I'm going to Frisco. They're looking at renaming Gore Mountain Range after a native name. The list goes on and on. Boulder, Colorado Springs, Salt Lake City just passed the declaration last week. Farmington, New Mexico as well. The more and more people hear about this, and it is tough, it's a tough history, but that's where it should start. We want people to acknowledge it so that we can move forward. If that leads to reconciliation, great. Absolutely, we should do that because we believe that if we all learn together, we're all going to benefit. All of our kids are going to benefit. My kids, your kids, our grandkids. And so you want to go on to the next one? And what I'll do is I'll leave you with some, go ahead and go to the next one. I'm skipping over a lot of these because I wanted to go to, keep going. One more. One more. One more. Thank you. Along with the Utes, one big thing that Colorado's been doing, and the governor specifically, is working with the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes about the Sand Creek Massacre. If you don't know about the Sand Creek Massacre, you will. We're working with the tribes on building a curriculum about that as well. We have a lot of teachers that reach out to our office and History Colorado wanting to teach their kids about the Sand Creek Massacre. And we had an opportunity every Thanksgiving for the last 10 years, and then my predecessor before that, there is a spiritual healing run. It's a Sand Creek spiritual healing run, where the tribes, the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, that's northern Cheyenne in Montana, northern Wyoming in Wind River, Wyoming, and southern Cheyenne and Arapaho in Oklahoma, all come up and their youth run for 3 days, day and night, from Eads, Colorado to the west steps of the Capitol. And it's to not only honor their ancestors who were brutally murdered and slaughtered, but also at a time when it's cold, it's raining, it's snowing, and it's to go through that same, obviously, to bring recognition at that same time frame, in that same weather, inclement weather that they had to go through because they were running from the cavalry who were there to murder them and slaughter them. In 2014, I had an opportunity to talk with the governor who knew a lot about the Sand Creek Massacre anyways. He, in fact, named his first brewery in Denver the Wynkoop, after Ed Wynkoop, who was an ally to the tribes. Wynkoop didn't want to see Sand Creek Massacre happen. He knew it was probably, and maybe possibly heading that direction between the federal government and the Cheyenne and Arapaho people. But one of the things was, in 2014 was the 150th, and the more and more we talked about it, the governor said, well, what do you think the tribes, what is something we can do as a state? And I said, honestly, Governor, no state has apologized on the atrocities that came at their hand to our indigenous cultures. That would be a starting point. And You should have saw the lawyers light up in that conversation. And I think that what was amazing is that it started there, and it started with the governor knowing about the history about Sand Creek, and then it led into doing this recognition, and then it was down to him, and I have an amazing story about it, and I won't go into it, but it really was up to him. At the end of the day, it was his decision if he wanted to issue us an apology on behalf of the state. And he did. And that's the quote that he ended with, that speech, on that day. But what it did also, I truly believe as an Indigenous person, is it planted a seed on what we're talking about, an opportunity for reconciliation. That we're acknowledging a horrific wrong, we're acknowledging a checkered history. Absolutely, history is tough. And I think that when we don't talk about it and when we don't bring those issues up, especially with our Indigenous cultures, we lose out on so much. And from this, he did this in 2014. In 2015, we announced that we were transferring 640 acres of state-owned land that were adjacent to the national park site out in Eads, Colorado. We were transferring through the state land board. We gave all that over to the national park site. Transitioned 640 acres of state-owned land back to the site so that they can continue to tell the story. The next up is advocating for a permanent Sand Creek Massacre Memorial to be placed at the state capitol, on the state capitol grounds. So I'll be meeting with the tribal representatives in 2 weeks in Denver to go and look at different places there on the capitol grounds so we can continue to talk about this. What's interesting is just a few months ago, when there was a big question and controversy around Confederate statues, they contacted Colorado, some folks, and said, some media outlets, and said, hey, how many Confederate statues do we have on state land in Colorado? Which there are only 2, 7 total, but 2, and it wasn't one side or the other. It was just very general overview of the Civil War. Sand Creek Massacre happened during the Civil War. That was, a lot of people don't understand that. And in fact, we actually worked through the Civil War Trust, a foundation that goes back in the South, to repurpose and purchase battlefields to continue telling the story about the Civil War. And so that's why this great partnership was happening between the Civil War Trust and the Sand Creek Massacre. I'll end it with that I think one of the big things that this leads into, and you can go to the next slide, is what is taking place now. What does that mean? That was 150 years ago. How is that impacting me now? Well, the governor said, well, let's go ahead and I'll issue an executive order to pull a commission together, because we have 39 schools, K through 12 in Colorado, that use some kind of depiction, image, caricature of Native Americans. Some may be on a spectrum of, one may call it racist, some may not. A majority of them are just like the term Indian. But they're all different, and they're a wide range and variety. But one of the interesting things is, as we put this commission together, this is a short-term commission, 6 months, brought a bunch of people on here. We went to these communities, 4 schools. We went to Strasburg Indians, we went to Loveland Indians, we went to Eaton, which are the Eaton Reds, and we went to Lamar, which are the Lamar Savages, believe it or not. And we held these community conversations. It was the first time we actually took tribal leadership, elders, youth. We had 2 high school students, one native, one non, on this commission. And we said, let's have a conversation. We're not here to tell you and blame you for this history. We don't think that these atrocities came at your hand or you're directly involved with this. We just want to let you know and educate you on why some of these caricatures are degrading, why some of these things. There's a way to approach this, but if we do it right, and if we do it together. And so, some states look at it as Colorado, that's way, further down the line. A lot of people said, you want to have a conversation about what, everything going on with the Washington Redskins and everything else. We said, absolutely. Because this is where it gets down to. It gets down to that one Native American student who is scared to death to stand up against his or her school or community because they're uncomfortable with that logo. They're uncomfortable with that caricature. And not all tribes wear headdresses. Not all tribes are viewed as the same. I mean, 576. And we all have different languages. We all have different cultures. And so that's really what we're working on at the end of the day. Again, I just want to thank you, thank the community for allowing us to be able to talk about some of this stuff. You can go to our website, the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs, for this document. We have a whole report on how we actually talk with schools to have public conversations about this, to have speakers, bureaus come in and talk about what different logos means and what kind of different colors mean to that tribe, and the list goes on and on. And so we just want it to be as a reference for our whole state, for all of us as we move forward. So I'm available at the end for any questions, but again, Art, thank you so much for the opportunity, and we can transition to Regina.
Actually, you know, I think it'd be good now if people had some questions. If there's any burning questions, let's ask a few before we go to Peter. Is anybody? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I've had the privilege throughout the last 8 years to volunteer on different reservations in the United States. And I mean, the stories I hear is that there's still lots of broken agreements, lots of things that our federal government does with the complication of the states in regard to following through on promises. And so I'm wondering I've never had the chance to talk to somebody who works with the government. So what's your understanding?
Of how the current process is of when we work with the tribes and our state government?
Yeah, and how much follow-through is there to keeping promises, or how much is there going back on promises? They find minerals on certain land, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that's a great question, because I think that from my perspective, just what I've seen personally, every administration has gotten better. And I think because we've had this commission to maintain and keep, my biggest thing is to keep tribal voices at the table. There's one thing I always remember my father saying and my grandfather saying, which was, and even other former tribal leadership, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think that that holds so much truth in the conversations that tribes who maybe can't afford big-time attorneys, who can't afford all the flights back to DC, to constantly be beating on doors at the halls of Congress, they're trying to take care of their people there in the community. And I think there's an opportunity that we have in Colorado to break the mold on why we should have a strong state-tribal relationship. And in my opinion, a lot of the policies that we've worked with different federal administrations and state administrations are now even more important, because when you look at the attack on public lands, if it's Bears Ears, if it's Canyon of the Ancients, whatever it is, all of those are taking tribal's voice away from that table, back 10 steps, 20 steps back. And it's been an honor to work with Governor Hickenlooper, who clearly sees why it's important to have that voice at the table, and continues to honor that. But I also would say the same thing with when we were having similar conversations with Governor Owens. And I think that it's been a process that I hope that when we're done with this administration in the next 462 days, but nobody's counting, that we will have created such a model for the state that people would be scared to even mess with it. To say, this is the way it should be happening. This is the way that we should be moving forward in this kind of process. And I have about 35 other counterparts across the country. Not all of them are set up like commissions. Actually, the last recession, a lot of them let go of their commissions because of funding. I mean, Oklahoma had a huge commission. They have 39 tribes. Now they have a governor-appointed individual. And I'm an office of one, but I also work with 25 other people who are advocates that help support this work. And so I think that that's the model we're trying to do, and I think the more we have those conversations, it's led into now it's the first time we're doing state-tribal consultations. We have the Colorado Department of Education agreeing to do a state-tribal consultation with the tribe that they've never done in the history of Colorado. That just happened last November. And we have other state agencies following up and saying, you're right. Just earlier this last week, I was down at Ute Mountain having a state-tribal consultation around social services issues, talking about Indian Child Welfare Act, talking about foster care placement, 4E funding, all these programs that are intended to go to tribal communities but never get there because of complexity or hurdles or whatever it is. Yeah.
And one more question, if there isn't, and Catherine, you turn the projector off. Any more questions? You want to wait till after? Oh, please, Marcia.
What can we as just citizens do to further the cause of justice and of taking responsibility for our history?
That is such a great question, and I'm sure that Art would probably try to bring that up at the end, because I think that there are some clear things that some of us in the community have been talking about. But we also have communities across Colorado that are asking the same thing. The folks in Crested Butte want to do a similar thing. So whatever is done here and is supported by this community, if it's policy, if it's business, if it's whatever it may be, to bring the history of the Ute people, the history of the Pueblos, all the tribes in this region, there's also a possibility about partnerships with these other communities to create a regional approach on a lot of this stuff. I mean, how amazing would that be to connect a lot of these communities? Because at the end of the day, we just want these stories to be told. We want to be heard, we want to be acknowledged. And then I think through that process. So I don't know if I have a perfect answer, but I think that at the end we might wrap up with some options for you to,
Good idea.
that we would challenge you all to also learn about this and give you resources as well.
Thank you very much, Ernest.
Thank you. Yep.
No, we're really honored to have Peter Pino here. Kathy, can we turn that off? Turn off the machine projector? Yeah, so we don't have the light. Thank you. It's not in people's eyes. We're really pleased to have Peter Pino from the Zia Pueblo. Some of you are probably asking, what does that have to do with Telluride? And if you don't know that, then you're going to learn something today. But one of the reasons I really admired Peter, I went down to visit him in Albuquerque, was his association as a board member with the Native American Rights Fund. And that's a very important organization if you don't know about it. So please welcome Peter Pino.
Thank you, Art. Before I acknowledge you as a group, I want to acknowledge the spirits that are in this room, and that's our traditional way of addressing different groups in our paths that we have an opportunity to address. And I hope that summary of what I said, I acknowledged our forefathers, our grandparents, our fathers, our brothers, our sons, our elders from the female sector, our grandmothers, our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters. You're here in physical form as well as spiritual form. And the spirits have asked them to give us the proper guidance in our dialogue and our discussion here this evening. I'm asking for them to provide us the guidance, and that we as physical beings follow that guidance and have a discussion with respect, honor, and dignity. Again, my name is Peter Pino. I'm from Zia Pueblo. Zia Pueblo is located 35 miles northwest of Albuquerque, New Mexico, off of 550. That's the highway that goes up to Telluride and Ouray. So it goes through the Pueblo of Zia. We're 18 miles west of I-25 there in New Mexico. The reason why Art invited me to make a presentation here tonight is that we have a mandatory council meeting every year on December 29th. And in that council meeting, we are in the room maybe 4 or 5 times bigger than this room here. All the male members of the Pueblo of Zia over the age of 18 sit in council. We sit on the 3rd floor in the room, And we have a marathon session from 7 o'clock in the morning to about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. No coffee break, no lunch break. It's a marathon session. It teaches you a lot about patience and respect and honoring your tradition and culture. But it's, in that setting, the Kasiki tells the story of the origin of our people and the migration route that they took to be at the present Pueblo of Zia location. And that story takes about 2 to 3 hours to recite in the native language. And they have name places as they tell the story of the origin and migration story of the people. And that story starts in the underworld to a place in the north. And that story comes up through 4 levels of worlds. First world being yellow, second being green, third being red, and now we're on the 4th world, which is the white world. Once our people got onto the surface of the white world, they migrated in a southerly direction. And they have named places for some of the places that they passed through. The name of this place is Jitiana Gash Katrut. Gash Katrut is Mesa Verde. And Gash Katrut means a place of many homes and large structures. Jitiana means to the north of Mesa Verde. So our people went through this region, and we hear that story every year. And we hear those place names as they migrated through this region. And the only thing that they left before they got to Mesa Verde were petroglyphs. And that's how they communicated. And I'm sure many of you have seen petroglyphs in this region. I personally have seen petroglyphs from Mexico all the way into Canada. And about 4 years ago, we started making petroglyphs. Park Service doesn't want Native Americans to do petroglyphs on Park Service land, because that's where you see a lot of the petroglyphs. It's because we would confuse the scientists. We would confuse the archaeologists. And they won't know when to date, how to date some of the artifacts or some of the petroglyphs. So I'm going to pass this around. You can look at it, touch it, and feel it. And the way we as Native people learn is by using our 5 senses. So with the petroglyphs, you're going to use your eyesight, you're going to use your sense of feel, touch, and you're also using your ears because you're listening to my presentation. And essentially it's stories told by our forefathers. And the petroglyphs that I'm passing around are ones that I made. And to show that our tribes and our Native people just don't represent the past. We're here today and now, and we're going to be here in the future. At a young age, I went to Mesa Verde. I went on a tour with one of the non-Indian tour guides. And the information that she was sharing at the time was that the people at Mesa Verde that used to live there mysteriously disappeared. They didn't know where they went. And I was there listening and hearing this migration story, origin story of Zia. I knew that our people passed through there. And I was there as a descendant of that group. But at the time I felt too young to try to get into the discussion with the tour guide. So I refrained from making any comments. But since 1993, when the Native American Rights Fund or the NAGPRA law came into existence, Mesa Verde started consultation sessions in 1993. I was at the time working for the tribe. I started working for the tribe in 1973, just out of college, before I started pursuing my graduate work. Started working for the tribe, and I was there for 41 years, retired in 2014. But since 1993, we've been doing consultation sessions with 24 tribes that were associated with Mesa Verde. and that included the 18 pueblos currently existing in New Mexico and the Hopi people, plus the 2 Ute tribes, the Icari, Apache, and Salida del Sur in Texas. So essentially, we've over the years changed the term Anasazi to Kenyan, or the ancestral Puebloan, as the proper term to refer to our forefathers that occupied the Four Corners region. The reason why they only left petroglyphs on this route of migration is because they were hunters and gatherers before they got into the Four Corners region. Once they got into the Four Corners region, that's the time they learned to plant seeds in the ground. And in order to have a harvest in the fall, once you put the seeds in the ground in the spring, you had to stay with the crops for not days or weeks, but months at a time, so that you assure yourself a good harvest at the end of the growing season. Realizing that they had to stay put in one region, that's when they started to build homes. And that's why you start to see the structures, the evidence of our people at the Mesa Verde region. Our pueblo itself was settled in 1200 AD. Mesa Verde will tell you that around 1100, 1150 AD, the last people moved out of Mesa Verde. And that's about the same time that they started developing villages within the Rio Grande region of the state of New Mexico and Hopi in Arizona. So essentially, our forefathers went through this region, passed through this region, and so what happens here in Colorado, here in this region, is important to us. And one of the other things that, the reason why this place is important to us is because we were migrating in the southerly direction. The future is represented by the south, and when we pass on as individuals, the spirit of the person that's passed on does a 180-degree shift, and that person's spirit retraces that migration route back into the underworld, back to Shipa. That's a Charis word or language word for the pathway that we came through from underneath and within Mother Earth. That spirit goes back into that Shipa, and for the next assignment, we believe in reincarnation. So not only did our people pass through here, the spirits of our people, when they pass on from this world, retraces that migration route and goes back into Shipa. And tour guides at Mesa Verde pronounced the word Sipapu. So you might have heard that word in the past, but it's Shipa. So it's important to us as a past, it's important to us as a future, because the community still has members on the reservation, and their spirits are continuing to pass, and they pass back through this region. And we go to places like Telluride and Mesa Verde and other places to address the spirits of that region so that we can continue to get guidance. So that hopefully explains why I'm here today addressing you as a group. I'll end there as far as my connection to this region. One of the other reasons why I got invited is because of the Native American Rights Fund. They're based out of Boulder, Colorado. I became a member of the board in 2014, or I'm sorry, 2012. And I'll be finishing my term on May of 2018. But we provide the direction and guidance for the staff at the Native American Rights Fund. It is a organization that's composed of attorneys, and attorneys that represent the 500 plus tribes within the United States boundaries. They have served those tribes directly and indirectly. They also serve tribes that are not federally recognized, but are recognized by their states. There's some tribes that are not federally recognized, but state recognized. So those tribes also benefit from the services of NARF. The director of NARF is John Eckhawk. And just last week we celebrated 50 years of the Pre-Law Summer Institute. John Eckhawk was part of the first class. He started in 1967. And this program is at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And he graduated in 1970. When he finished law school, he went to California. And the concept of a Native American Protection Fund came into existence. And then he was put in charge of coordinating the establishment of that legal fund. And in 1977, the office moved to Boulder, Colorado. And then he became the director of the office at that point in time. But essentially, the organization fundraises in order to get the dollars to be able to present and represent the tribes in legal issues. One of the issues that directly benefited the Pueblo of Zia, having NARF attorneys representing the Pueblo, is in the late 2010, there was a lawsuit that was filed by several tribes throughout the United States for the mismanagement of tribal assets and funds by the federal government. And in 2012, that case was settled. So Zia was able to get some of the money back from the federal government that they mismanaged. So that directly benefited the Pueblo of Zia. Just at the end of last month, September, they represented a tribe, Klamath tribe in California, about their water rights on the Klamath River. The Bureau of Reclamation did not provide water to the tribe and other tribes downstream on the Klamath River, and they sued the federal government for not giving them the rights to or access to the waters in 2001. And just at the end of September, the judge ruled that the junior water users were in the wrong in not allowing the senior users of those waters access to those waters. So the judge decided that first in time, first in right, senior water rights are supposed to be adhered to before junior water rights. And the way the senior and junior water rights work, the seniors are the first ones that came into a region. They were the first users. The junior water rights owners are the ones that came later. And they have second priority, or even third, fourth, fifth priority to those waters. So they just settled on that case in favor of the tribe. So those are just two examples of the cases that NARF worked on and were successful in protecting tribal rights. That tribal rights protection is becoming more and more important in this days of American government. So we're always fundraising, and I'm going to give you, there was a question of how can we as individuals or as organizations help address some of the issues and problems that we face as Native Americans. The address of the North offices is 1506 Broadway, Boulder, Colorado, zip code 80302. And their phone number is 303-447-8760. And their email address is www.narf.org. You can go to that website and they'll be able to give you how you can make contributions or make donations to assist in North continuing their efforts of protecting rights, legal rights of Native people and tribes. I stand ready for questions. I know we're on limited time. I hope that we, the three of us, will originate some meaningful discussion at the end of our presentations. And you're at the table. You're not on the menu. So let's have a meaningful discussion and maybe throw out some ideas that might be able to bring our groups closer together, because in the time that we find ourselves today, unity is very important. We need to unite. In the end, it's what we as individuals have in heart, have in mind, have in body, and have in spirit. If you're comfortable in your own skin and you know who you are, then you'll be able to be saved when the world as we know it changes, because you'll be able to be used as that seed I was talking about. When our forefathers put them in the ground, they had to nurture them so that they can become assets and become sliceable harvest in the fall. So we as people can learn from one growing season about life. We don't have to wait to learn those lessons within our own lifetime. We can learn those lifetime lessons every year as farmers. So as long as you're true in heart, mind, body, and spirit, you have nothing to fear. You'll still be here once the world changes as we know it today. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple quick questions. Anyone, please?
Yes.
I wanted to know what the petroglyph symbols meant.
The one that has the lifelines, where is it? And the petroglyphs, archaeologists and other people try to interpret petroglyphs, but the only one that can give you a true interpretation is the one that actually did the petroglyph. And I did this one, and I'll try to be as quick as I can. Essentially, I started making walking sticks about 6 years ago. And I sat and wondered, well, how do I identify myself as the artist that did that walking stick? And that's how this petroglyph came about. And essentially, this petroglyph talks about saying that we came out from the underworld, the first world. And we came up from underneath Mother Earth. And we went up to the first, this is the first level, second level, third level, fourth level. Once we got on to the white world, this is where we live our lives. And this represents our lifeline here on the white world. And as you climb, as individuals, we have 4 mountains we have to climb. The mountain of infancy, the mountain of adolescence, the mountain of adulthood, and the mountain of elderhood. You don't need the assistance of a walking stick or a cane till you're somewhere in your adult mountain climb or your elder mountain climb. So that's why the 2 mountains are shown here. At the end of your life, you hope to be on the downslope of your elder mountain, and that's when your lifeline retraces. I was telling you about the spirit going, retracing the migration route. This represents kind of the same line of thought. this is your lifeline going back down into the underworld for the next assignment. And essentially that's one of the interpretation of this petroglyph here. The other message is that our forefathers migrating south had to inform their fellow people that were behind them, because they didn't all travel at the same time. They would give them signs of where they could find water. They didn't have any running water. They couldn't turn on the faucet to fill their water container so they could continue to go on this journey. They had to find a water source. And when they found water sources, they would identify them with bird tracks and give them so many bird tracks to tell the people how far the water source was from this petroglyph location. So I used roadrunner tracks here just to add a little more mystery, because roadrunners, you don't know whether they're going or coming, because their tracks are like shaped in an X. But when I know that Telluride people go on a lot of hikes, you don't see birds all the time in your hikes. You see a congregation of small birds where a spring is, or where a water hole is. And that's why they identified the birds as a way to identify a location of the spring. In this petroglyph, the valley here is where the water is. And essentially, when they came up onto the 4th level, that's the first time they saw the heavens. They saw the sky. And so that's why I show the star, to acknowledge the existence above the surface of Mother Earth. And that's the interpretation of this petroglyph. As a student in college, I used to listen to Paul Harvey. How many of you remember him? Paul Harvey. At the end of his story, he would say, "Now for the rest of the story." My name is Peter Matthew Pino. So M is my middle initial. So the first P is a backward P. E-T-E-R. And again, my middle initial is M for Matthew. The two mountains make up the M. The regular P is for Pino. I-N-O. So it shows my English name. My Indian name is Uaitira. Uaitira is spiritual water in the bowl. The bowl sits right here, and that's where the water is. So it also tells about my Indian name. I won't be who I am without my wife Stella. Her name is Stella in English, and what does that mean? Star. And the reason why the star is a little off center to the left is because my wife Stella is left-handed. And then there's spirits that I was talking about earlier. The female spirits, there's a spirit to the north, to the west, to the south, to the east, above and underneath. The female spirit to the above is Husheti. That's our native name for that spirit. And her Indian name is Husheti. So that's both our English name as well as our Indian name. So that's kind of a long story to the interpretation of this petroglyph. But anything that we do is not easily explained. It takes much time to do the explanation. But essentially, this is to show that we are still living, and we're kind of at the 11th hour. The cell phones, the computers, the tablets that we're all using, and the little daughter or the girl that asked for the explanation of the petroglyph is looking at a cell phone. In the future, that's going to become useless. We're going to go back to basic, simple, organic way of communication. So I'm hoping to come back to Telluride sometime next year and do a workshop on making petroglyphs.
Thank you so much, Peter. Yeah. We are in discussion with AHA. I think they're very interested in trying to make that happen, so watch for that. It's really a great honor to welcome Regina Lopez-Weisgang. She's an amazing speaker, and she's been a tribal leader, which is not a traditional feminine kind of thing. And so this is a very interesting leadership that she's giving us, and giving us a voice to people who have not had a voice for a long time. Please welcome Regina Lopez-Weisgang.
He told me to take as long as I want. So welcome everybody. My name is Regina Lopez-Weisgang. I'm a member of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. I'm a former tribal leader for the tribe, but I'm also the former co-chair of the Bears Ears in our tribal coalition. But I want to start with asking everybody a question. So how many of you like to go hiking? How many of you like to fish? How many like to go bike riding on the trails here? How many like a tall drink of water? I've named off something you eat. I've named off something you drink. And I've also named off something that's really important to us, which is to have a daily honor to put our feet down on Mother Earth. Something to be thankful for. Something that sometimes we don't take time to be grateful for. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes we're engulfed in our technology and our busy lives that we forget that just feeling our own heartbeat, connecting with Mother Earth sometimes gets forgotten. So one of the things that I want to kind of wrap up with what both Ernest and Peter have provided for you today is one of my greatest honors as a tribal leader that I was at first I was a little bit scared, and I think just having this time with Peter, I remember meeting him last year, and I was very grateful because when I came to Telluride last year, I was an elected leader for my tribe. I was very honored to be able to receive the welcome and the messaging that you all put out with heart and good intentions. Because, as Ernest has mentioned, this is a wonderful opportunity for this community to be a model, not only to our state and to our region, but also to the nation. Because there's a new movement that's out there, and that's acknowledging the simple fact that Indigenous people have a voice. We're not just a check mark on a white piece of paper that says consultation check because I talked to a brown person on the street. It's a much deeper conversation. It's about that water. It's about the dirt we walk on. It's about the air we breathe. But more importantly, it's our relationships with one another as a part of this system. Sometimes we have a tendency to talk about the ecosystem and we take ourselves out of it. We're very much a part of it. The minute we change it, nothing will ever be the same. And how many times can we count in a day we've changed something? We don't stop and think about those things sometimes. But the important conversation that I would like to share with you, that I had the honor to participate on as a coalition member, was in regards to what we proposed was 1.9 million acres, but it ended up being 1.35 million acres in southeastern Utah, a place called Bears Ears. Very much like the story that we've heard today of people who have moved through a certain location, a certain region, either living, migrating, picking medicinal herbs, conducting ceremonies. And that was the Bears Ears region. A region that is very unique in the ask that the Native people presented to former President Obama. And I say this is unique because historically we've always had policies dictated to us and prescribed to us in the best interest of the indigenous people, native people, or tribal people. Very rarely were we a part of that conversation. But what makes this opportunity unique, which also you will see the value in your opportunity to also make a change in something that could truly become historical, is that now we're taking ownership of what we see as sacred, valuable, and important. Not to just today, but to honor the past, but even more importantly, to ensure that our future generation, like our children, have that opportunity to learn from the land just as we do today and our ancestors have, to be able to read these kinds of messaging, history, our paths, location of where the water source is. Because our history, and he loves this quote because he said he uses it, because our history is written on the walls and the land. This is why it's so important to speak up for the voiceless. It's so important that this conversation continue on in such a manner, because if we don't, this is also an opportunity for many of us to contribute, because this is going to set the tone for future discussions on public lands, national monuments, national parks, and that we're no longer just a box to be checked off, but now we're at the table. It represents so much to so many people that oftentimes we get used to talking about it from left to right, maybe up in the air a little bit, but very rarely do we talk about it in a sense that we acknowledge those who have been there before us, or been there right along the same time that some of our ancestors were at. Sometimes we get engulfed with my people, or just the you people, and we don't acknowledge other people that may have come and gone. And it's important to us because those relationships are absolutely important. I thought I turned mine off. They're absolutely important because they teach us how we forge relationships with one another, with our Creator, with the Mother Earth, with the elements that are needed in our daily lives. You cannot separate that. You can't separate it in ceremony. You can't separate it as an indigenous people of the land. You can't even separate it from contemporary times in our existence and our need to coexist. What I would really like to present to each of you today is a challenge. To own what your responsibility is, and it's a great conversation we had last night, and I appreciate that. But to own what that responsibility is today, I don't want you to feel guilty about what happened yesterday, because we can't change history. But what we can do is make a better tomorrow. And how do we make that better tomorrow? By having greater exchanges, dialogues, and begin to brainstorm about ways that we can problem solve together. We have a very traditional virtue that we live by. No one gets nowhere alone. I did not get here by myself. I have two parents, my mother and father. I have grandparents. I have elders. I have my ancestors. I did not get here alone, nor can I exist alone. In order for me to be here, I have to have my neighbors, I have to have relationships, but more importantly, I have to be in this present self, and I need to absolutely feel comfortable in who I am and value that, because I can't help others if I can't help myself. So I'm going to take a moment and drink a cup of water, okay? But I invite each and every one of you to go out to these places. Go out to the Sand Creek Massacre site. Go out to Bears Ears. Go out to the hills. Go visit your public lands. Use them. Because the best way to protect them is by using them. Because then you develop that relationship and connection. When you get out there, take your shoes off. Take your hands. Reach down to the ground and feel what you feel. Feel that rock. Touch that tree. Because we as Indigenous people believe there's a spirit in everything. There's a spirit in the wind. Take that moment and embrace it. We have the luxury of freedom of speech. Do you know how important that is? How many of you like to write stories, poems, sing a song? When you come back from those experiences, write, paint a picture, sing a song, share it with people, because there's no better way to let people know how you feel about these places and the connection than to do it where you feel comfortable. And to be able to share that is a great honor, because it does nobody no good to keep it right here. It doesn't do the world any good. And you may find it a healing process that you can share. Because in this day and age, I think we get so caught up in the hustle and bustle of the world. Even of things around the world we worry about. But just take that time. Feel your breath. Feel your heartbeat. Enjoy life. Because we can make it better by being better neighbors. I want to thank everybody for this wonderful opportunity, the second time I get to come out and speak to people. Thank Ernest, work closely with Ernest as a former CCIA member. NARF, I want to say, is a very supportive organization, and the Bears Ears National Monument is a monument. On December 28th, President Obama designated 1.35 million acres. That doesn't make it safe. It's actually under threat. NARF is one of the representing legal staff to help defend the movement and to try to maintain those 1.35 million acres. Truly grateful, because on top of their support, we have other legal staff that are working hard. But on the day that was designated and I received that phone call from the White House, I celebrated for probably about 5 seconds and then called up Charles Wilkinson and said, okay, Grandpa, what do we got to do to defend it? 5 seconds, guys, and I knew we were going to be defending it. We appreciate your support, your prayers, more importantly, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. Thank you.
So why don't you all come up and we can just maybe have just a little brief discussion about what can folks do. I know last night we had a good discussion with Durfee about some of the ideas that were tossed around. We talked about this curriculum, this 4th grade curriculum that's being developed by CCIA, and they don't have any schools exactly lined up to take them. It's an individual school board. So one of the things that Telluride could do is to convince our schools, the mountain school and the public school, that maybe they could take up this curriculum, which will be developed in December, is that, yeah, and see if we can run with it next in 2018-19 in our schools. So that's something to think about. But maybe did you want to talk at all about that curriculum?
You know, it's it's curriculum that's being developed in consultation with both tribes. And the biggest thing we found out, successful projects, programs, initiatives between state and tribes is if it's tribally driven, right? That it's not the state saying, hey, this is what you should be learning, which is what's been going on. So I think that other states have done this, Montana, Indian Education for All, South Dakota, Washington, a lot of states are requiring Indian education and Indian history in the local schools. This is just a step in Colorado to do it. Why it's so unique is that CDE can only work with the tribes to present a curriculum. It's up to each individual school district to approve and agree to do that, because we're a local control state. and all curriculums have to be approved by your local school district. So this would be a resource for teachers. It's what teachers have asked for many years, but it's also in consultation with the tribes and the Ute Museum under History Colorado. And so that's another effort to think about.
One of the other things we talked about were scholarships, and I was under the impression that Fort Lewis was free for Native people. But I learned that's not exactly the case, right, Regina?
No. It's tuition free, but all the other fees and costs they still exist for our Native people. So, you know, as we look at resources, the tribes do provide some resources, but it's still a burden that the individual student has to bear some individual costs.
That's like a couple $1,000s a year, something in that order, right? Yeah. And you actually benefited from a scholarship yourself.
Yes. When the Council Tree celebration used to happen, the City of Delta and other groups that help support that used to provide 3 scholarships to a recipient from each of the 3 Ute tribes. And one year I was a recipient of that scholarship, and it truly did help me.
You know, so that's something we might think about here in Telluride, is if we could sponsor some of the Ute Mountain Ute, which is the closest reservation, or the Ute Indian Ute Reservation in Fort Duchesne, where people that lived last year moved or were forced to move. Or, you know, in the Southern Ute as well, which are the 3 reservations in our area. So to help them go to a school where they don't have to pay tuition, we might be able to supplement that with a scholarship from here. Peter, we're kind of doing a lot of cultural exchanges. What's the value in that? You know, as a long-time Pueblo leader, what do you see the value in European Americans and Native Americans exchanging cultural ideas like rock art?
Yeah, well, we went to 2 schools here in Telluride yesterday and had sessions with the students. And the kids are the ones that are going to lead the world in the future. Our forefathers have always taught us that the children are the ones that are more pure. They can make that connection with the spirit world. And they're not biased, they're not corrupted, they're not polluted by adults telling them how they should live their lives. They're still free to think and absorb. They're like sponges. They take in all that information. So the exchange that we had yesterday was really good. We had the teachers, we had the kids, and we did some turkey talk. And I really enjoyed the connection, because it's just a simple little bone that comes from a turkey. And our forefathers used this to call in other turkeys so that they can harvest and be able to survive by doing that. And the children just loved it. We lost control of the session for about 10, 15 minutes. The end turkey call. After the session, anybody welcome to come and try to do that.
Another thing that we've been working on, again, I've been working with Durfee on this in the Institute, is to try, we sent a letter out to all the festivals asking if they would have a Ute elder or a Native American person welcome people to our valley here and speak a little bit about Native issues. And so if you're connected with any of the festivals, I'd ask you to kind of talk to people and see if that's a possibility. We'd be, as the Institute, be glad to work with you to try to make that all happen with lodging and all the expenses that might go with that. Well, what about you guys? Anything else that we haven't covered that you think might be?
Yeah, I'm so new at this that I forgot to mention that I'm actually the education director at the Ute Indian Museum. So I'd just like to take this moment to welcome each and every one of you to the newly expanded Ute Indian Museum, to come on over and visit us. And if you want to have a discussion with me, I will sit down with you anytime.
We actually, Kieran and Regina and I all have chatted a little bit about the possibility of some collaborative work between this museum here and the museum in Montrose. And I know that some of the teachers in the school were very interested in seeing if Regina, who's so close, could come up and help with some classes and things. So again, you might reach out to your teachers and ask them to bring Regina up. I think that'd be a possibility as well.
Or I would say not just the teachers. It is just an awesome place now. I was there last summer and I just didn't even want to leave.
Well, come back.
Here, here. Any other thoughts?
I just want to invite all of you. We've come here to Telluride. Zia Pueblo celebrates its feast day on August 15th. We were forced to become Catholics. So we're Catholics so that we can be legal in our marriages and some of the legal stuff that we had to go through in life. So we celebrate our patron saint's name on August 15th, Our Lady of Assumption. So we do the corn dances all day long. And each household is open to friends and strangers alike to come into the home and eat some food. It's not cheese and crackers and hors d'oeuvres. It's stuff that sticks to your ribs. Every household has a good cook. Stella is a great cook. So come and visit us on our homelands. So you get a better feel for that we're not just all talk. We're a living community, and you'll be able to have an opportunity to talk to other tribal members during that celebration.
Peter, any last thoughts from you? So with questions, I'm sure people have. Durfee, and then
well, not a question. I didn't want you to adjourn without mentioning the Placerville site, and
right,
and to just reestablish that kind of connection.
We had a wonderful ceremony last year, which is our first Indigenous Peoples Day celebration. You know, San Miguel County was one of the first government agencies in the country to declare Indigenous Peoples Day rather than Columbus Day for this weekend. And that happened in 1998. So I'm real proud that we here in San Miguel County recognize this important issue, and now it's being recognized around the country. So last year we did our first with the Telluride Institute after I left the county. And the county helped us, and so did all the municipalities. And we actually had a plaque erected that was written by Roland McCook, a youth elder who's been a good friend here to us. And we dedicated it last year. Regina spoke quite eloquently at that point, talking about how the hills hadn't heard the honor drums or the voices of youth for so many years. And I tell you, it was a very touching and deep moment for many of us. And it is down there. You're welcome to go take a look. And maybe next year, Durfee will try to figure out a little way to honor that again with a little ceremony as well.
Is it in the park?
It's right near where the basketball court is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right along where the parking lot is on the side there. Dan, you had a question?
Well, just a comment. As president of the board of the Telluride Institute, I wanted to take an opportunity to thank these wonderful speakers, and RQ especially, for spearheading this whole wonderful exchange. We obviously have our website, TellurideInstitute.org, which might help in furthering the communication and keeping the conversation going as we go forward. There's a lot of complicated addresses that came out today. We could have those all listed in links and so on for how we get help as individuals and so on. So, Art, you can help us develop that site, and you can have those links available at TellurideInstitute.org.
Okay, please.
Yeah, I just wondered when you were talking about knowing bears almost immediately would need to be protected, that I'm kind of thinking of Standing Rock and all the people that came out, the thousands of people, native and non-native. Is there any thought about protesting, about having rallies, about really using the voice of all who care about that?
Well, and you make a very well pointed out point. And something that makes the movement of Bears Ears a little different from Standing Rock. But we do share one common thing, and that was a lack of or a very mild form of consultation with the tribes, which is why you have a little bit of conflict on both sides. And that, at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to on many reservations, many public land issues that are tied to Indigenous people. It's a weak consultation process. But what makes Bears Ears different is one of the movements of the 5 tribes, which is the Navajo, the Pueblo of Zuni, Hopi tribe, Ute Mountain, and Ute Indian tribe made up a coalition of 5 tribes, 5 sovereign voices. But the real moving force to all of that was a sense of healing. And there's one thing, if anybody doesn't really hear about, and that was all the conflict, atrocities of history, because we chose not to go to that place because we wanted to make a better tomorrow, but we needed to heal. And that's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of the demonstrations, the protests. The protest, if you largely look at the bigger picture, comes from the people, the groups that oppose the National Monument. We wanted to come from a very comforting, healing place that didn't cause confrontation. And so it started from within ourselves, and we wanted it to radiate out. And so it was more of a peaceful way to seek protection.
Couple more questions, please, in the back.
Yeah, there was something in the paper about bringing youth here to do some skiing.
You know, so some of you remember Susie Chaffee, Susie Chapstick. She had a program to bring youth from the Ute Mountain Ute tribe up here to Telluride to ski for a number of years. So when I was talking with Manuel Hart, who was the former chair, served on the council with Regina, he was asking if we couldn't start that up again. So the Telluride Institute, Audrey Mornoy and I went and talked with the ski area, and they agreed. They've given us 2 days, December 16th and March 24th, to bring up 50 youth to come and ski for free for all day. We're still looking for some help with lodging and some of the expenses, so if you're interested in helping, we'd love to see you help us. But we're really proud of the ski area that they're willing to step up and do that as well. So one of the things that's been powerful, it's one of the things I think everybody here has alluded to, is that when we work together, when we start collaborating across all these different gaps that we have, that's when things become really juicy and we get things done. One last question? Thank you all very much, all right?